Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Frames. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. And with me this week, I got my Fantasy and Frames compadres. I got Nate Markham. How you doing, sir?
Doing wonderful. How are you guys?
Good. Mr. Todd Barnes, how are you?
What's up, Jorge? Just ready to talk some football.
Nice. All right. Well, we have a special guest this week. I'm going to bring him on right now. He's David from fantasygo.com. How you doing, David? You right there?
Oh.
He's trying to figure out something. Can you hear us? He's doing something.
There we go. Gotcha. Sorry,
Okay.
I could hear everyone except for Jorge. I can see your lips moving.
Sorry, guys. How you doing, David?
There you go, fellas. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into today's show, let's actually just talk about Fantasy Go a little bit. I know I'm a member of Fantasy Go, and I'm sure Nate and Todd and Aaron and everybody else here at Fantasy and Frames will definitely going to be signing up for Fantasy Go to provide our services as fantasy analysts. But maybe if you could just give the masses a little information about your website, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks for the plug. So fantasygo.com created the site last year. Really, it's a platform to be able to connect fantasy analysts to their fans. There's we have a functionality in Yahoo where you can actually co-manage a team. But if you're not on a Yahoo team, it's really an opportunity for podcasters and what have you to be able to get a one-on-one personal experience and help them week by week to win the games and hopefully win the championships. So yeah, just a real one-on-one personal experience for I guess fantasy football lovers and the podcasters they follow.
Very nice, very cool. So everybody who all the four-eyed fans out there who are looking for personal advice, head over to Fantasy Go mid-season. Hire us as your fantasy analysts, as well as hundreds more. And with that, let's just get into some Fantasy and Frames news right now. The four-eyed championships drafts are officially done, I believe. That's not exactly completely true. I think there's like 4 more picks in Todd and my division. But aside from that, we are set, and we can't wait to start the four-eyed championships, all for charitable causes. Can't wait. We do have our GoFundMe page up, Fantasy and Frames GoFundMe page, so please donate to that so we can reach our goal. We are about 95% of the way of reaching our goal, so thank you very much to everybody else who's donated. The fantasy community never ceases to amaze us, and so with that, let's get into some relevant fantasy news, and let's just start with the home run right off the bat. Damian Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs, running back, opts out of the 2020 season for COVID reasons. Clyde Edwards-Helaire slides in, automatic first-round pick. Right, Nate?
Yeah, I think so. At least that's what my projections say.
This kid, you have to remember something about the Chiefs running back situation with Andy Reid specifically. Andy Reid has never drafted a running back in the first round, and yet he's had tremendous running back talent. So if you have any concerns about, some player coming in and stealing the spotlight, like we were talking about in our pre-show, Devonta Freeman, that's not going to happen. I say that, and then knock on wood, and tomorrow Devonta Freeman gets signed by the Chiefs, and I look stupid.
Yeah, don't say that. But and like we also were saying, it's very eerily reminiscent of 2017 when a certain running back named Spencer Ware who got hurt, and then Kareem Hunt got the opportunity in that. Put up 18 touches a game or 18 carries a game plus the receptions. And that was not even a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. So now you throw that into can he go top 5 or top 6? I think the inflation will be pretty high right now, but I'm excited. I also just took him today too, which helps out.
Right.
The one thing I'd say with that though is
will you say with that, David?
Damn right, exactly. He's about to talk bad, and I was like,
Exactly. As his screen is frozen. We'll get back to David in a little bit. Other fantasy relevant news: Kenny Galladay and T.J. Hawkinson of the Detroit Lions are also were placed on the COVID-19 exempt list. We're putting out an article soon this week talking about the relevance or the value of Marvin Jones. His value just went up a little bit, don't you think, guys?
I guess it all depends upon if that was exemption from contraction or if it was just being around somebody positive. I guess we'll never probably know that information unless they reveal it themselves. Welcome back, David.
Sorry, guys.
And
Internet connection here is bad.
No worries. We just transitioned to Kenny Golladay and TJ Hawkinson being placed on the COVID-19 list. So that is, interesting. Marvin Jones, definitely a value. You'll see that, whether Matt Stafford was there or Matt Stafford wasn't there, he was one of the more consistent wide receivers in fantasy last year. I won't tell you whether or not he's undervalued or not. You'll have to read the article in the next coming days to find out. But that is all the news that we have coming at you today. Our topic for today, let's just get down to business, is we're looking at the NFC South. We're continuing our division evaluations where we compare the players in the division with where they're going in terms of their ADP and giving you an idea of like, okay, should we draft these players and where they're going, or should we draft other players around them, just so you get an idea of value and who to invest your time in and all that jazz. So with that, let's start with the quarterback situation. I'll start us off here. Matt Ryan, he's going 76th overall, the quarterback 8. That's a 6th-round pick. His ADP has him around players like Marquise Brown, Darius Geis, Tyler Boyd, Kareem Hunt. Matt Ryan had a pretty good year last year. He was QB 11 in fantasy points per game with 18.8. He had the 8th most touchdowns with 26. He had the 5th most passing yards, the 3rd most passing attempts. Say what you will about Dirk Cutter as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator, he loves to pass that ball or likes his quarterbacks to pass the ball. The concern I have with Matt Ryan is through weeks 1 through 8, he was averaging, stellar 21.3 fantasy points per game, just completely off the charts. The second half of the season, week 9 through the end of the fantasy playoffs, he was only averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game. That's kind of like a big drop off right there. He is currently, as I said, QB8, so that puts him in the QB1 territory. Given who's around him, like a Marquise Brown, a Tyler Boyd, a Kareem Hunt, I am torn, to be honest with you, whether or not I would take Matt Ryan here. I feel like Tyler Boyd is a good value. I think Kareem Hunt as a flex value is definitely a good value. Marquise Brown, I am indifferent about, which maybe that tells you more than it should. And Darius Geis, look, I'm a Washington fan. I want the Darius Geis experiment to work. Will it? I don't know. Therefore, I'm not going to invest a draft pick so early on something that's uncertain. So I can definitely see a reason why you'd want to take Matt Ryan, but I'm staying away at his 6th-round price. I think I can get better value later on in the draft. David, what are your thoughts on Matt Ryan, real quick?
And to I guess your point, you absolutely are dead on. You've got to start picking up your wide receiver 2s, 3s, running back 3s at that stage. 6th round, if you're not getting your Lamar Jacksons, your Patrick Mahomes, you're now in the next tier of quarterbacks. So I'd be happy to wait another 6 rounds to get a Ben Roethlisberger. I think you're going to get similar production out of someone like that, rather than giving up some pretty decent wide receivers, running backs, or potential top tier tight ends at that stage.
Absolutely. Going now around later at 80th overall, the QB9, also within the division, Drew Brees. He's going around in terms of ADP. Players like Jared Cook, I'd rather have Jared Cook. Sony Michel, I'd rather have Drew Brees. Julian Edelman, I still think there's fantasy value in Julian Edelman, even though Cam Newton's there. I'd rather have Julian Edelman. Marlon Mack, Will Fuller, Rob Gronkowski. Here's some cool numbers about Drew Brees from last year that really make me stop and pause here. QB7 in fantasy points per game when he came back from his thumb injury with 20.8 fantasy points per game. Was the QB5 in touchdowns with 27. He was the QB5 in touchdowns with 27 after missing 5 games. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. The 26th quarterback in passing yards, like I said, he missed 5 games, so obviously. But, when he returned from injury, he came back week 8. Then they had the week 9 bye. But from that point forward, he was averaging 22.7 fantasy points per game. Like I said, he is the QB9. He is a 7th-round pick. Here's an instance where I would play it safe and take Drew Brees at this ADP, given who is around him now. I guess the exception I had mentioned was Jared Cook. But even then, I still think you can find tight end value later on in your drafts. Todd, what are your thoughts on Drew Brees at his current ADP? Would you take a draft pick with him?
I love Drew Brees. He's one of my targets, him, Stafford, some of these guys that I can get later on. But these guys that I can rely on. Yeah, Drew Brees is definitely a guy I've been drafting.
Nice. What are your thoughts, Nate?
I agree with Todd. I like where he's going. Obviously, he can support the addition. We'll get into the wide receivers. He now has a sure-handed number 2 that he hasn't had for, really since Brandon Cooks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
2016.
It's been a while. Yeah, he got even more weapons.
Now jumping another round ahead, the 8th round, 92nd overall, QB 12, Tom Brady. Okay, here we go. Now, for all the New England fans that are there, or the Tom Brady fans, I should say, are there, the Tampa Toms. I'm just going to give you a spoiler right now. Not a fan. He's going around in terms of ADP, like players like Ronald Jones, John Brown, the starting running backs for the Miami Dolphins, Matt Breida / Jordan Howard. He's going against his former teammate James White, Darius Slayton, wide receiver of the Giants. In 2019, he was only averaging 17 fantasy points per game. Since 2015, his fantasy points per game has decreased by a couple points each year. He's going to a new system, which, although you would think that they would let him incorporate some of the elements that made him successful in New England, he is still going to a new team. He has a lot of weapons around him, and I feel great about the weapons around him. But for him himself, I am a little scared, given everybody who is around him in terms of ADP. I would pass on Tom Brady, despite him being surrounded by weapons. That's the thing about fantasy. You can be on a team with a so-so quarterback, and yet your skill players go off. That's fine. Just because you have great skill players does not mean you're going to have a great fantasy quarterback. However, David, you're a Patriots fan and former Tom Brady fan. What are your thoughts there?
I am Tim Brody. I think that's his name. Look, 97-year-old Tom Brady has not gone for over 5,000 yards since 2011. That's what Jameis Winston did last year, guys. We're not getting 25-year-old Tom Brady. We're getting, is he 44 this year? 43, 44? Yeah, right. He's a check down guy. He's accurate. He is the GOAT. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, he's obviously Hall of Famer. Without a doubt, right? But that's not the same guy. If he was still in New England, we would be having a conversation of saying, is Tom Brady draftable? Now he goes to Tampa Bay, and people are taking him sometimes, I've seen, as high as the 5th round, which is absurd to me. I'm not really a believer in it. He likes his safety blankets. He likes his James White check down guys. He likes his tight end and Gronkowski. So I think we're going to see a lot of little passes. But yeah, Tom Brady is not going to be putting up the same numbers as he did way back when. But definitely way too high for me.
Agreed. And finally, going 173rd overall, the QB 26, Teddy Bridgewater. When he started, he averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game. I think that's all I need to say about Teddy Bridgewater. Let's go to running backs. And David, let's talk about some running backs in the NFC South and compare them to their ADP, shall we?
All right. So I want to talk about a guy. He's big and burly. It's Todd Gurley. The Falcons were number 1 running back, right? Last year, he 223 rushing attempts, 857 yards for 12 TDs. This guy averaged 70.1 scrimmage yards a game. Everyone keeps talking about his knees, but he was effective, even though the Rams didn't utilize him as much as they possibly could. Averaging nearly 1 touchdown a game. That's impressive. 17th most rushing attempts, 5th most in rushing TDs. I'm a believer in him. I think he's going at a crazy steal in the late 3rd, early 4th round. What do you think, Jorge?
Yeah, I am all aboard the Todd Gurley train. You look what he did towards the latter half of the season. High double-digit fantasy points. Yeah, the yardage wasn't there, but the touchdowns were there. The attempts were kind of there, and that was behind a bad offensive line. Now you give him one of the best offensive lines in football, which you will see that it'll be one of the best offensive lines in football because they have a couple first-rounders coming back that they selected a couple years ago to help with protection, but they got injured last year, so they couldn't actually do anything to help Matt Ryan in that offensive line. But now they're coming back. There's no real competition in the backfield. I don't see Ito Smith challenging Todd Gurley. He can still run, he can still catch, and with the wide receivers they have on this team, it's going to free up Todd Gurley in those running lanes, something that he hasn't been able to do for a while since he was an MVP candidate a few seasons ago.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, definitely, especially underutilized in the passing game as well, which I think we'll see more of this year. But moving along to the Panthers, and their running back, his name is Christian McCaffrey. I've got to look up his ranking. He went RB1, I think he is right now, and overall number one. Nate, your thoughts on CMC? Do we need to talk much about him?
I'm sorry. What page was he on the rankings? Page 3?
If you scroll to page one, top of the, I think, I've just found it.
Yes, he's good.
Yeah.
He's good.
I hear he's good, yeah.
Fantasy that's what you get here at Fantasy Frames, guys.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
hire us a Fantasy Go. That's what you get.
Exactly. I'll tell you what, though. Can you imagine how much the world is going to be turned upside down if he opts out of his deal?
Oh, my God.
Oh,
Reggie Bonifant season.
Yeah. Is it who's the backup running back there?
Reggie Bonifant?
Think about that.
That is absolutely his backfield. I mean, last year went for nearly 1,400 rushing, 1,000 receiving. Guy's a beast. We don't need to say any more about him. You're taking him number one, unless he opts out, obviously. But yeah, he's a beast. Moving on to the Saints, and I think this is where it could get interesting. There's two guys we want to talk about here. Todd, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray. Just quickly, Alvin Kamara had a slow start last year, but finished with nearly 800 rushing yards, 5 TDs, about 533 receiving, and 1 TD. He's going 4th overall. What's your thoughts, and are you comfortable taking him at 4?
Todd, what do you think?
I mean, I'm definitely comfortable taking him in the top 4. Last season, he finished as RB12 in half-point PPR. 2017, 2018, he was top 4 both years. He saw a pretty big touchdown drop-off last season, only had 6 touchdowns, 31 combined touchdowns in 2017, 2018. You don't really bank on TDs, but if there's one guy that you could say, I could bank on touchdowns, I would bank on Alvin Kamara. 81 touchdowns in each of his – not touchdowns, receptions in each of his first 3 years in the league. So especially in PPR, overall in his career, he's averaged 100 targets a year. So, I mean, in PPR, he's a monster.
Oh, yeah.
So they're using him, I guess, I wouldn't say a split backfield, but probably like 60-40. Last year, Latavius Murray only got 25 less rushing attempts and put up decent numbers. It was 637 yards and 5 touchdowns, exact same as Todd Gurley, right? They both finished with the same number of touchdowns. Latavius was still used a little bit in the receiving game. Are you worried about Latavius Murray eating into his time? Because he put up pretty decent numbers.
No, actually, as a Saints fan, I don't want Alvin Kamara taken on. He hasn't had over 200 rush attempts in his career. And I don't really want that. He's a guy that gets banged up a little bit. So if you're an AK owner, I mean, I want Latavius Murray in there pounding the ball down the middle instead of Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's helping you out mainly in the passing game. But, I mean, even though he has lower rushing attempts, he's rushed for over 700 yards every year he's been in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not bad. I can see some upside going there. I guess last but not least, I'll put this out to the group, and this is kind of like shooting darts blindly, right? The Buccaneers, I guess, running back field, right? Ronald Jones was not as bad as people give him grief for. He got still 6 touchdowns, 724 yards. I'm not saying that's top, but you're getting him pretty late in the rounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think that continues, or we've got Keyshawn Vaughn there as well? Like, what do you guys think about who's going to be the lead dog, if it's going to be a transition, and where you would take him?
So, Todd, you recently put out a running back sleepers article at fantasyandframes.com, which we are the live streaming show for. So go to fantasyandframes.com, read all of our articles, from IDP articles that Nate covers to receptions that Todd covers, as well as our sleeper players for the season and draft strategy and rankings and whatever you could possibly want. You can get it all at fantasyandframes.com. You have a Bucks running back that you had mentioned in your article. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, there's one running back you didn't mention, and it's Dare Ogunbowale. I do not know if I said that right, but I tried it. I always just call him Dare. But yeah, he actually led the backfield last season with 35 catches. And PFF recently put out a tweet. He was third among running backs with a 2.6 ADOT. So he's definitely a guy. I mean, I'm not saying he could assume the James White role, who has had 70-plus receptions in each of the last 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, we know Tom Brady checks down. He was still on the field a lot last season. He was on the field for 367 snaps compared to 422 for Ronald Jones. So Dare was on the field a lot. They did bring in the rookie as well in Keyshawn Vaughn, but I think Dare's maybe a guy that we don't want to forget about. I think he can really affect the passing game in Tampa Bay this year.
Yeah, there's one aspect, too, about that goes in. Obviously, there's the narrative that Tom does not like the rookies to be in his backfield. He likes the veterans to go back there. But the first time I believe that one of the running backs misses an assignment or two and Tom's on his butt, that's the first time that you don't see him, that particular running back, get into the game for the next the doghouse, I guess. And that's not an uncommon thing to see, especially considering they're going to pass the ball probably 600 times this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's actually Ronald Jones. I think that was one of the things he kind of struggled with picking up blocks, and I think that's why, in that kind of situation, Dare was on the field a lot more for Tampa Bay.
Makes sense.
Do you guys have faith in any of them? Just lastly, because I personally am not touching it because I don't know who's going to be the lead dog there, if there is going to be one.
No.
Yeah, just because Tom Brady's on your team doesn't mean your running game all of a sudden is going to turn into gold. Like I hate to break it to you, that's not going to happen.
And split it 2.5 ways, if that's even the case. And then what you get a ceiling of 600 yards rushing for 2 of the 3, and maybe 200 or 300 for Ogunbowale.
Ogunbowale, I believe.
I know.
Which for PPR upside, I would definitely take him in the later rounds. Good job there, Todd. All right, let's get the wide receivers. Nate, that's your area, or should I say receivers? We're including tight ends in this discussion.
Yeah, I'll go through the receivers starting out, because in all fairness, the NFC South is loaded with high end guys that I think are all going about where they probably should be. If we start in New Orleans, like we did with CMC, Michael Thomas, I think the clear wide receiver 1, maybe a case for Devontae Adams or Julio if you want to, but for the most part, he's going overall pick 5. I don't think there's any questions. Does anybody have any concerns with Michael Thomas as your first pick if you're picking at spot number 5 through 7?
No,
I'm good. I'm going to raise my hand here. I would personally prefer a Derrick Henry, a Dalvin Cook over Thomas. Thomas, I don't disagree with you that he is the hands down number 1 wide receiver, but we've discussed it many times, the depth we've got. I mean, you mentioned a few guys there, Tyreek, Julio, Hopkins, guys who could potentially put up similar numbers. You're kind of missing out on 2 real studs there in Henry or Cook, over guys that you could possibly pick up the next round.
I agree with that. I think draft strategy aside, I think that the receiver is so deep that I have a hard time taking Thomas where he's going. If he slips later into the end towards the back of the first round, I think you have to jump. But I understand where you're coming from. His running mate, though, is the intriguing part of the New Orleans receiving corps, is that the question in the narrative goes like this: can Drew Brees support 2 top 30 wide receivers? And the answer is yes. The concern is he hasn't had another wide receiver in 3 years, realistically, that is even worthy of putting in that conversation. Traquan Smith. I mean, his legitimate number 2 is actually Alvin Kamara, but his number 3 will be probably one of the more sure-handed people in the league is Emmanuel Sanders. He's got an 88% true catch rate. If you look at the last 5 years, I know that's a pretty large sample size. I mean, he's finished as the wide receiver 33, 18, 23 in 3 of those 6 years. And the other time he's been just outside of the top 30. So he has that wide receiver, 2 upside, and he's being taken as the 41st wide receiver overall. He's going to, pick 106. I am a fan of Emmanuel Sanders. I think the value where you can get him at, I don't know if you guys think there's too many, if they're trying to force feed Thomas, is there too many targets going his direction? Or do you see some of them funneling the way of Manny?
one thing I would say is people were having this conversation when he went from Pittsburgh to the Broncos, right? And that year, he put up career numbers. I believe it was 10 touchdowns and 1,400 and something or other yards. I don't have the exact stats in front of me, right? He works amazingly as a number 2. And now he's going from a team, San Francisco, who in the NFC Championship had 8 passing attempts and with 6 receptions, right? They're going to be throwing the ball a lot more. I think Emmanuel Sanders as a wide receiver 3 is incredible value.
Exactly. Just like you were saying, if you go running back, and Sanders is your 3, even 4, the upside's there. Jorge?
No, I love Emmanuel Sanders. One of the concerns I will say, though, is it seems like the Saints are setting up Drew Brees to have a great year, but the skill players around him maybe take a step back just because, you have Michael Thomas, you have Jared Cook, who he had chemistry with down the stretch last year. You bring in an Emmanuel Sanders. They may or may not be trying to make Tre'Quan Smith still a thing. And, of course, we just talked about him. We have Alvin Kamara out of the backfield absorbing targets. I guess as a whole, like I said, those skill players, I think the output is going to be diluted a little bit. But I agree with what David was saying. When Emmanuel Sanders went to Denver after Pittsburgh, as a number 2, he functions really well. He likes getting with these veteran quarterbacks. Veteran quarterbacks feel comfortable with him. You look what happened when he was traded midseason last year to San Francisco when San Francisco was throwing the ball. Garoppolo would target Emmanuel Sanders often. Why? Because he's a reliable target, great route runner. I think I agree with you. He posts tremendous value, but I temper expectations just slightly.
Yeah, and I understand that. And that's why he's going as the 41st wide receiver overall. I think that it's baked into his ADP. Moving over to Carolina, the Carolina Panthers are intriguing because no one really knows of all the teams here what you can expect. New coach, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, a lot of questions and concerns. The things we do know is that they have Christian McCaffrey and that they're going to be bad defensively, and that means they're probably going to be passing. I had no clue how many passing attempts they actually had last year. They rank in the top 5. Teddy Bridgewater gets the ball. Who's he going to throw the ball to? That's pretty evident that it's going to be DJ Moore. DJ Moore right now is wide receiver 15, going overall around pick 37. He's legit wide receiver 1 in my book. I don't have a concern with taking him even earlier. I think he's in that upper tier, 135 targets last year, and that was missing a few games too. So if you have that same type of production with a better, more accurate, more skilled quarterback, I think that number should improve. I can go around the horn and ask you guys what you think about DJ Moore, but I think we're all in agreement, correct?
Let me tell you, in all my mock drafts I've been doing for like my home league, for example, I go running back early and I get to my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and it's like DJ Moore, T.Y. Hilton, Beckham, all these other players. I keep gravitating towards DJ Moore. He has such a stable floor of double-digit fantasy point production, in the low teens, and it can only get better going forward with a quarterback that throws the ball relatively short distances, which is right around DJ Moore's sweet spot, makes a lot of plays after catching the ball. I love him. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's definitely got a safe floor for sure. I'm just not sure. It's such a big quarterback change, that I don't know if he's going to be the same guy, because with Cam Newton there, he didn't really have the great rookie year we're all expecting, right? But yeah, look, he's definitely got a good floor, but his upside, he had a few games last year where he went off. I personally would rather, at that stage, a T.Y. Hilton, a Beckham over DJ Moore if I had to choose. But I definitely think, if he's the only option at that ADP, then definitely take him.
Yeah, the question might be, is the difference between Cam and what we can expect or what we saw last year from a production and just in catch rate. So his catch rate went from 67, 68% all the way down to 63%. And if you think that number has to go back up and you can play 16 games, obviously I'm doing a projection of, in clairvoyance, but if he plays 16, You couple another 2 to 3 percentile on the catch rate, and you start at a baseline of 135. 150 targets is a huge ceiling that maybe he won't get there. But we all know that they're going to be passing the ball. They're not going to be in a position to run too effectively all the time, other than what McCaffrey will do. Their number 2 receiver, though, is the one that I don't know who people would agree on. Is it Robbie Anderson? Is it Curtis Samuel? Right now, Robbie Anderson is actually the wide receiver 51, going around pick 137. But I am a fan of Curtis Samuel for where he's going at 58, 158th overall. I mean, right now he's pretty much he's going along the same lines of the Jalen Reagor, Deshaun Jackson, Eric Ebron, Preston Williams. A lot of pure. I see that as the best ball tier, if anything. I hate to separate them, but that's where I see that. And I look at. I didn't think I was going to like Curtis Samuel as much as I actually think like is a stretch. See potential in. So guess who, if you had to say who ran some of the most routes last year in the entire league, and I say some of because he was top 3, and that was Curtis Samuel. He also had the most uncatchable targets. So you combine those two things with an inaccurate quarterback, and now you throw in Teddy Bridgewater, who historically has been on the intermediate to short passes, highly effective. He's good on deep ball as well, which we'll get to Robbie Anderson, but I don't think there will be the chance for Robbie Anderson to necessarily stretch the field all that much. I think he's going to actually stretch it and leave some room for Curtis Samuel, who, he had 17% target share, 19 target quality rating of 4.2. And if you don't know player profile and their target profile for the target quality, that's poor. It's very, very poor. So I think there's potential ceiling for him. I will ask you, Todd. I know we've had a little conversation about Curtis Samuel. Your opinion?
I like Curtis Samuel. He was actually only 30 wide receivers last season had over 100 targets. Curtis Samuel had 106. Out of wide receivers in the NFL, he led the NFL with 19 rushes. He was second among wide receivers with 130 rushing yards. One of only 12 wide receivers to score rushing touchdowns. So he kind of affects that kind of part of the game as well. But yeah. Jarius Byrd ran the slot for them last season, ran over 400 snaps from the slot last season. I'm hoping they just get him out of there, and that opens the door up a little bit more for Curtis Samuel. But, yeah, I like Curtis Samuel a lot this season. He did have 6 touchdowns, too, a little 2 more than his running mate, DJ Moore.
Sure. Anderson has that ability to get 180 yards and 3 touchdowns off 4 attempts. That's the only one thing with Anderson is he's got good top end speed. One of the most inconsistent guys in the league as far as wide receiver. He's my kryptonite. You always play against this one player when you're going against him. You're like, oh no, I know Robbie Anderson's done nothing for 4 weeks, but this is the week that he gets 270 yards and 4 touchdowns. So every time I go up against him, I always lose. But yeah, he's definitely got big play potential. I would rather the safety blanket in Curtis Samuel with DJ Moore being the clear-cut number 1. It's probably going to open up more lanes with one-on-one coverage that Samuel will see.
Yeah, Robbie Anderson, 16th in the NFL the last 3 years in touchdowns with 18. Crazy. Jeez, so go big or go home. Let's go to Tampa Bay. Jorge, did you have something? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, my friend. Tampa Bay should be short and sweet. Obviously, they have they're good. They're good. They got Chris Godwin. They got Mike Evans. You can flip either way you want. If you tell me Mike Evans is going to be better than Chris Godwin this year, and you'd rather have him at number 8 overall than Godwin at number 6, I won't complain. I think that there is, again, I use this term narrative quite a bit, that Tom doesn't like to throw deep. I mean, he's highly effective at deep passes. Evans shouldn't see a huge regression in that capacity, but I think that it's pretty known that Godwin will play similar role to what Edelman. I don't think they're going to be in the exact same scenario, but it's going to be if you have to go from transition from toy to toy, I think that will be Godwin. I mean, and there's nothing that I have to say any more about Godwin than what he already showed on the field last year. David?
My concern is not necessarily Godwin or Evans. It's my personal man crush in Rob Gronkowski. I see a lot of red zone targets taken away from both those guys there at their ADP. It's just a touch too high. I think they're going to be incredible receivers. I personally would take Evans just because he's a little bit more value. I think they're very much a 1A, 1B. But yeah, I can see their production going down. We're forgetting James Winston went over 5,000 yards last year, guys. That's pretty impressive. Was it nearly 5,100? Something to that effect.
I mean, you know what else he did? He also he also had a 7% interception rate, which means that there's a good chance that Brady eliminates that. The league average is 1.5. So if that regresses just to the mean between the two, that means how many more plays are they going to have the ball in Tom Brady's hands potentially? They already won the 6th and the 4th most plays in all of the NFL in the last 2 years. So you're right. I do believe that Gronk has a little bit of, the red zone fear. I'm not the biggest Gronk fan as much, but I'm gonna let you have it because my nephew is, and he might be watching, so I want to trick him. Does anybody think that Watson, Miller, Johnson, any of the number 3s are even going to legitimately have anything to do with the offense?
With Todd shaking his head right there, and he does excellent work with scouting all these wide receivers for us. That should tell you all you need to know right there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So the last team is the team that has had the most pass attempts in the NFL last year by about 50 over the next closest, which is the 684. That means there's going to be plenty of balls to go around to my personal man crush has been Julio Jones for a while. I pick a good one to have one on. Is probably one of the most dominant wide receivers in the league with, 140 plus targets in the last 5 years, 1,300 yards in 6 straight. So there's nothing more I need to say about him other than is he maybe undervalued? But because if the touchdowns actually have a positive regression, is there any chance that he's not the number 1 or 2? I mean, he's 3, 5.
And this guy's so good, right? He's been good since 2013. I mean, you look at the guys who were elite at that time. It was Demaryius Thomas and what have you. I mean, he's still been consistent. I mean, it just shocks me how amazing Julio is. But yeah, it's irrelevant. But yeah, it's just such a talent.
It's the touchdowns, right? That's the only reason. If he actually had the 8, 9, 10 touchdowns each year, there would be nobody even doubting anything. But the person who I think is probably getting the most hub in Atlanta, beside not named Julio Jones, would be Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley right now is wide receiver 17, going around 43rd overall. I think the value in Calvin Ridley has the helium has pumped him up to the point of where he probably should have been going. If you go back to February, he was right around pick 56, so a full round later. And I think that they're starting to see that, hey, here's a guy who's had 91 targets in back-to-back years and only 13 games roughly between, and on average. 7 and the 10 touchdowns is the part that I think that is intriguing. That's the hardest thing to figure out. Touchdown percentage is tangible, but you never really can predict it. And now with all the vacated targets, you've got 93 targets gone from Austin Hooper, 64 from Devontae Freeman, 40 from Sanu, and 26 from Hardy. So they're going to go somewhere. Probably Hayden Hurst will eat up some of them. But is it unfair to think that Ridley might get around the 115, 120 target mark? Jorge?
No, not at all. I mean, No, him and his chemistry with Matt Ryan has just been undeniable since his rookie year. There was a little bit of a health concern with him last year, but I believe it was his calf or ankle or foot, something foot related. Nothing serious, however. No, I don't see that outside of the realm of possibility. Like we were talking about earlier, Dirk Cutter in this offense, they like to chuck it. And, with teams doubling up Julio, that's going to open up Calvin Ridley. I think Ridley's in for a monster year. You now have Todd Gurley back there setting up that play action. That's going to help Calvin Ridley also. Calvin Ridley, a tremendous route runner. And tremendous route runners always are going to get the rub as far as, the first options that the quarterback is looking at. I'm totally excited for Calvin Ridley. I like where he's going, and I would definitely grab him at his price.
Who are the receivers going around him, though?
Right. So you have that's intriguing you said, because there's a lot of guys who are the number 1s on their team that might not have the volume I think that you'll have in Atlanta, but they're going to be close. Juju, Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton. Then you have a couple of the running backs, Lev Bells, James Conner, Mark Ingrams. It's an interesting spot for Ridley because he's finally inflated to the area where it does make it a decisive pick. You have to truly say, do I think that Ridley's going to be a legit wide receiver 1 this year for where you're going to take him? But again, that's also kind of assuming, do you want the injury risk if you're looking at running back with Conner and Ingram with the shared touches potentially? Are you a Ridley believer, David, or are you kind of out on him?
I'm a believer, but we see it every year. There's always a handful of guys who get extremely overhyped, and I think he's just been pushed up. I thought he was value, but I feel like I blinked and he goes up another round in ADP every single time. That's my issue, is that especially going into late August, we're going to see his ADP just skyrocket so high. I think he's great talent, but come on, man, you're talking about taking Keenan Allen, a guy who's been pretty consistent over the last few years, Juju Smith-Schuster. He's probably at that stage. I'd rather a Keenan Allen. I'd rather a Juju. That's me personally. I think Ridley's an amazing talent, but it's clear and evident that Julio is the number one there. Ridley is a number two. I don't think it's a 1A, 1B like we're seeing in Tampa Bay.
That's fair. It is. I mean, there's a chance that Russell Gage even can start eating into it. Todd, you agree. I know you do a lot of the work lately, and you'll see if you might be able to back this up. Last year, if you look from weeks 8 to 17, he had 66 targets and 400+ yards. I mean, that's not it's not one of those that you can just double and that's going to be his numbers. I don't anticipate 132 targets to Russell Gage, but obviously that has a lot to do with who was on the field with him. But there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense now. And I think you might be right, David. I think that he might have been pushed up to the point now where the value is not as great, but I still like his ceiling quite a bit more than than Keenan Allen, just because of the Tyrod concerns for me.
And my only concern with, to backtrack a little bit, my only concern with Calvin Ridley is if you are one of those who just go wide receiver heavy early in your drafts. Now, the running backs you had mentioned, the Connors, the Ingrams, those could be those like early 0 RB candidates that you may not want to pass up on. But if you're going running back heavy, I would. I'm pro Ridley. So
yeah. You guys want to touch on any of the tight ends? David, I know we could talk about Rob Gronkowski a little bit more if you want.
What we can we do the show for another hour? We'll talk about Rob. Well, so the one thing I want to say with Gronk just quickly. So he averages from Tom Brady over the last 9 years 870 something. I don't have it in front of me. I didn't do anything on Gronk. Sorry, 870 something yards per year, 9 touchdowns per game. People are underestimating. He's had a year off. I understand he's now 29, 30 years old, but that guy's going to eat. He's definitely undervalued there. There's no real major tight ends there. I know you mentioned Hayden Hurst, but I'm not overly excited about Hayden Hurst in that offense. But
I think Jorge is.
I'm very excited about Hayden Hurst. And if you haven't checked out his charitable donations page, the Hayden Hurst Foundation, head over there, make a donations for a worthy cause. You look at what happened with Austin Hooper. I personally I'm not a big Austin Hooper fan. I think he's a product of the system. And now you have Austin Hooper going to Cleveland and joining all the other running backs or tight ends there, excuse me. And you have Hayden Hurst, who's a first-round pick of the Baltimore Ravens. They ship him to Atlanta. I think, again, it's the system. I'm actually kind of I'm okay with Hayden Hurst as like a real deep tight end prospect.
And Todd, I want to talk to you about Jared Cook, because I think that you and I have the same agreement as far as where we think he should be in his upside or limited upside. Care to elaborate?
I think well, first off, he played a real prominent role in our offense last season. He was actually second among tight ends with 428 yards from the slot. 5 of his touchdowns and 25 of his catches came from the slot. So he ran a big role in the slot for the Saints last season. But he also had 8 touchdowns on the year. So, I mean, he's a red zone threat. He's a guy that when the Saints get down there, Drew Brees does look his way. So if you're waiting on tight end, he's a gamble. But I think he's definitely going to pop off a few games for sure.
Yeah, he definitely had a hot streak going down to end towards the end of the season last year. Okay, so that wraps us up, folks. Thank you very much for watching Behind the Frames. For more information about players in the NFC South, stay tuned for our podcast, Fourth and Frames, where we'll delve even deeper into player statistics and really give you the nitty-gritty from every single position, both on offense and defense, specifically speaking individual defensive players. I want to thank David from fantasygo.com for joining us. Head over to fantasygo.com, subscribe today. David, as always, it's been a blast, man.
Thanks, Finn. Always have fun.
Todd, Nate, as always, it's been great, gentlemen.
And I didn't even get a chance. I didn't even look. We had all these comments from a bunch of idiots that don't know what they're talking about. Mostly they're friends of mine that obviously want to go on and talk trash about the Chiefs. So it's why I don't normally call our viewers idiots. Sometimes, occasionally, but not all the time.
Thank you for all the viewers on Facebook and Periscope who commented during this time. Thank you for supporting Behind the Frames, and we'll see you next week, folks.
See ya.